I think if you've watched any of my videos, you would know that Kuro takes great effort in including literary and cultural inspirations in many of their stories. From Levi, Nietzsche, Eliot, and Borges, the amount of references that have been made in the story of Wuthering Waves is massive.
That's quite big.
And so, I always get asked, within this ever-expanding sea of culture, what has been your favourite symbolic reference so far? And even with every patch introducing more and more cultural tidbits to analyse and explore, my answer has always stayed the same. Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes appears within Cartethyia's story. In my opinion, this symbolic framework, really, as you'll learn in this video, is in my opinion the pinnacle of the references that Kuro has placed within Wuthering Waves. Everything from Cartethyia's character, her drip marketing, cinematics and trailers, the entire narrative direction of the patch, even the design of maps, has been formed, framed, and molded around just a single book. Well, two books actually, but we'll get to that later. It is something that Kuro's storyboarders planned and wrote, I think, with the full intent, knowing that 85% of the players who enjoyed Cartethyia's story would never even scratch the surface of the tale that Cervantes told, and what it meant for a girl that ran through wheat fields in Egla town. Don Quixote tells a story of an old man in the Spanish countryside of La Mancha, who dreams of tales of knights and chivalry from the tales and books he reads at his home. Despite living in a time where such fantasies were a thing of the past, the old Quixote takes on a ridiculous adventure of knighthood on his own, enlisting the help of the village farmhand, Sancho Panza, and riding his old white pony, Rocinante, on made-up fantasy adventures of glory, to the shock and confusion of everyone around him. Cervantes' Don Quixote is a tale that fundamentally speaks of idealism, of dreams, dreamers, and the joys of the fantasies that they envision. However, it is also a story that is measured with a significant degree of caution. While any reader can idealize Don Quixote as a hopeless romantic, he is also positioned as a fool, a caricature of an irrelevant, senile old man with fantastical dreams in the fading dawn of his life. Idealism, after all, is a raging sea that very easily can spill into delusion. As such, Don Quixote, for any reader, seems to paradoxically vilify, as much as it glorifies, these foolish adventures of a wandering knight. Can the power of hope and fantasies ever really be mediated by the crush of reality? It is this question that lies at the crux of Cartethyia's story and design. The first reference to Don Quixote in Wuthering Waves actually comes before Cartethyia's story even begins, at the very end of the 2.1 update. Cristoforo, as elusive as he is, mentions in passing the tragedy of Quixote and Sancho, foreshadowing the entirety of the story to follow within just a single literary reference.
Armed with a wooden spear and a broken helmet, the knight charged at the windmill. His squire, ever loyal, trailed close behind as if becoming one with the knight. Together they charged again and again, true knights in spirit, ignoring the countless wounds they bore.
Within this small piece of dialogue, we first learn of how Cartethyia links to Quixote, and when we read her story, we begin to see how far this single mention actually goes. Her first character story, The Knight's Faded Hours, makes direct reference and expands upon the most famous scene of the novel Don Quixote, the battle against the windmill. Within it, Quixote and Sancho mistake the swinging arms of a windmill for a formidable giant, and Quixote attacks it, being flung off his horse in the process. Even today, the saying, striking at windmills, come from Cervantes' work and symbolizes immense, almost delusional idealism. This story is faithfully reinterpreted within Cartethyia's own story, where she sees a traveling knight in Egla town attacking a windmill, vowing to become his disciple. In response to the others of the town who viewed this chaotic knight with doubt, calling his fantasies a delusion, Cartethyia instead rebuts. To fight for such a giant, he must possess a heart of pure nobility. Instead of demeaning idealism as fantasy, Cartethyia believes that the ambition and freedom it affords is what truly makes up the essence of humanity. After all, not all problems, such as fighting God, can be solved without at least a little idealism that trumps rational sense.
Come to me, mighty God killer.
Cartethyia is a character of dualities. Made up both of her true childhood self and fleur-de-lis, it is perhaps not surprising that her symbolic characterization is also made up of two parts. While fleur-de-lis, iconic of duty and suffering, is crafted from the canon of the Holy Blessed Maiden, Joan of Arc, which you can easily see from the meaning of the fleur-de-lis and the character story Steadfast in the Final Dance, Cartethyia's real persona, characterized by unbridled hopes, dreams, and even innocence, is iconic of the almost silly adventures of both Quixote and Sancho as chivalric knights far past their prime. This characterization of Cartethyia as a wandering knight errant, while not wholly original to Don Quixote, is an archetype of character that Cervantes made incredibly famous within his work. Cartethyia's true persona makes references multiple times, not only within her narrative but also in lore entries, such as a cherished item, the worn wooden sword, the character story, the wandering knight marches to freedom, and even Cartethyia's signature dish, the knight errant's essentials. A wandering knight errant is a knight, oftentimes strictly upholding the code of chivalry, that wanders around searching for adventure. However, just like the 17th century Spanish countryside of La Mancha, where Don Quixote is set in, the age of wandering knight-errants is, of course, long gone within the world of Wuthering Waves, only existing in storybooks and one's imagination. However, at the end of the 2.2 story, Cartethyia acts to make this dream a reality, championing what will become a central theme of the Renaissance storyline: humanity's hope and idealism. When we even look at the structure of Cervantes' book, we can see that Cartethyia's life is a parallel mirror to that of the titular main character, Don Quixote. One thing that many people forget about is that Don Quixote is actually split up into two books, which Cervantes wrote 10 years apart from one another. When you put these two stories together, we can see that after the adventures of the first book, Quixote is tricked by the people around him to go back to the estate, where he is effectively imprisoned and miserable. It's only in the second book, after being trapped at home for some time, he goes on another second adventure. When you consider this order of events, being inspired to go on a nightly adventure, being caught and trapped by the people around him, before breaking free and going on fantastical journeys again, these three life stages match Cartethyia's story too. When she was a child, she roamed free in the fields of Egla town, where she grew up, and upon getting a prophecy from God, she was forced to serve her duty as fleur-de-lis, where she would have to throw away all her dreams and hopes. It is only after the end of the 2.2 story, after her imprisonment in the inverted tower is over, that she sets out again to be the wandering knight-errant of her dreams. The final quotes of her character stories spell this tragically chaotic cycle. She raced through the wheat fields. The world had never felt so vast. This was where the Blessed Maiden's legends began. Through the fields, through the festivities, and into the inverted tower. It would be a grand quest. She simply kept the name Cartethyia hidden deep within her heart. Farewell, grain fields swaying in the breeze, and the tumble yaks roaming so free. In a world so vast, someone must take up the sword. Someone must bind themselves in thorns. someone must accept the weight of responsibilities. Someone must become Fleur-de-Lis, the guardian of Renacito. No matter the answer that awaited her, Fleur-de-Lis was ready for it. With this resolve, she walked into the tower, alone. She only cared about what needed to be done at that very moment. And if that were true, then losing her memories was no great loss. In a world so vast, she would find herself again. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Cartethyia. I'm a wandering knight preparing for a new quest. If you ever do need help, let me know. I just had to try this before I begin my journey. The girl scoops up a spoonful of salad and takes a bite. In a world so vast, a salad full of viscum berries made the beginning of her journey feel just right. The influence of the story of Don Quixote spreads beyond just simply Cartethyia's story and character. The entire map of Egla town, where Cartethyia grew up as a child, is iconic of the Spanish countryside of Castilla-La Mancha, where Cervantes' story is set. The entire town and map, from its sprawling wheat fields, its Iberian Manueline architecture, and of course, most importantly of all, its giant windmills, are direct parallels of the world of Cervantes' novel. If it wasn't obvious enough, one of the Egla town windmills has a graffiti of a knight's sword, matching both Cartethyia's story and the novel of Don Quixote, where the old knight attacking a windmill is one of its most famous scenes. This graffiti actually comes from a side quest you can pick up in the area, called The Best Audience. This has you run around Egla town, taking photos of the graffiti on buildings to decipher the story and essence of the place. Nearly all of the graffiti features a story of a heroic knight, with one even referencing a knight battling it off with a giant, which, by now we know, is nothing but a windmill. A symbol of a sword and an eye, which Lorenzo tells us symbolizes hope, effectively confirms all we've talked about already within Cervantes' Don Quixote and Wuthering Waves. One of the tragic aspects of Don Quixote, as many readers will know, is its ending. Quixote, after being tricked to go home and give up his dreams and adventures, again in the second book, gives up knighthood and chivalry for good, and dies soon after. What many people do not know is that Cervantes, the author of Don Quixote, also met a similar fate. Having lived a life of obscurity, he died, sick and in poverty, on April 23, 1616, failing to know of two things. One, that he died on the same day as William Shakespeare, and two, that his book and writing would become a cornerstone of Western literature, being read for generations to come. This tragic fate of both Quixote and Cervantes is perfectly immortalized in what is, in my opinion at least, one of the top 3 greatest story cinematics Kuro has ever made for the game. Within the cinematic Dawn Arrives, we open with a fairy tale of a lone knight facing down a dragon atop his white horse, which is a direct parallel to fantastical dreams on Don Quixote and his old white pony, Rocinante.
A wicked dragon ravaged the land, leaving rubble and ashes in its wake. Despair loomed, yet a lone armored knight rose up. Riding a white horse, he wielded...
Oh, really?
Huh?
We've heard this dusty old story 1,000 times. Boring.
It's a wonderful story.
Thank you. But it's fallen out of favor these days. No one cares about a knight's tale. Best be heading home, young lady.
This is just such a good scene with a subtext that doesn't even need to be explained or spoken aloud. It just pays homage to both Cervantes and Quixote in such a iconic way. And I think the greatest thing about all of this is what it really means for Cartethyia. As we know from her first character story, even if she is inspired, she is not Don Quixote himself, but his disciple, his successor. Although she is now disillusioned and colored by reality, deep within her, her dreams of knighthood still live on.
A false knight like me needs no armor to shield her, nor a white horse to carry her past. Now, with this sword bestowed upon me, I shall bring the dawn to all! Whatever past lingers, whatever future calls, from now on, every moment ahead shall forever be free of the abyss!
Quixote's white horse, Rocinante, is an old farm pony beyond his years. He is, like Quixote himself, false and ridiculous. Yet Cartethyia does not need to convince herself with lies and fantasies. She knows she is not the true Blessed Maiden, but that will not stop her from achieving her dreams. The final scene of the cinematic, where the old storyteller protects a boy who made fun of his stories, is particularly poignant. Like Cervantes, who died thinking his stories would fall into irrelevance, the old storyteller gives his life so the next generation can hope to see the dream. A dream perhaps so unrealistic that one may call it a delusion. I think one of the greatest things about Kuro's use of symbolic references is that they are never necessary to understand and enjoy a story, but there is simultaneously a great amount of depth and care put into implementing them into the game. Cervantes' Don Quixote is but a single book, yet it has inspired nearly an entire character story and design, an entire map and quests, as well as even trailers, cutscenes, and other material. And you really have to consider that someone did all of this knowing full well that most players would never even think about any of the things that we just talked about in this video. We might never know why they did all of these things, but I think there has to be at least a little bit of passion somewhere in that answer. When life itself seems lunatic, who knows where madness lies? Perhaps to be too practical is madness. To surrender dreams, this may be madness. Too much sanity may be madness. And maddest of all, to see life as it is and not as it should be.
The truth will come to light.